to start sharing. And thanks so much, Trudy and Paul, for being with us and moderating the session. Turn it over to you guys.
Hey, thanks so much, Joe. I'm really happy to be here with Trudy and all of our distinguished panelists today. We've heard some great comments, some great calls to action already this morning, starting with Secretary Granholm, and then just some great storytelling. But I always feel like when we do these things, I use the analogy like when my kids were in club sports, you'd go to an event and you'd think everybody across the country was doing the same thing, right? Because you see hundreds of kids in this space. But we all know out in the general public, when we start talking about heat pump water heaters, you get a lot of blank stares still. And so our mission is never done, right? Every day. This is certainly an amazing day, and it's a culmination of all the tremendous work we've all been doing. But the challenge is still there in front of us. And the way I like to think about it is that each day, the opportunity is there for each one of us to impress someone in your professional or your personal network and get them interested and excited about heat pump water heaters. So maybe take that as a personal challenge for yourself, that each day you get somebody new and different excited about heat pump water heaters, because that's what it's really going to take. We have, in the new home building channel, it's such a tremendous growth vehicle for heat pump water heaters, right? As a new home gets constructed, if we don't have a heat pump water heater placed in it at that time, we've missed that window for the next 10, 12, 15 years, right? Before we're coming back. So there's no reason we shouldn't be partnering up with our home builders for that. And so I'm going to share my screen right now and call up our slides for today. Should be coming up. There we go. So anyway, yeah, this is a heat pump water heaters and new construction. So we're really happy, like I said, to have our panelists here with us. You can see, following the playing card theme of what each of us have chosen for this particular panel, but of course they're interchangeable. And I think we all wear many hats in this space, right? So this is how we've aligned today, but we certainly look for new opportunities each time. Just a little bit of the why we're here, right? And I mentioned how important this channel is for growth in the space. Single family homes in 2023, over 1 million, 450,000 in the multifamily space for homes too. So we can't forget that kind of structure. So tremendous numbers here. So they all represent an opportunity for heat pump water heaters. New construction accounts for approximately 16% of all new water heaters installed annually. So 16%, it's not insignificant. It's a material number. And so with that, a few years ago, Energy Star and AWHI in partnership recognized that there was an opportunity to bring more engaged, progressive pioneers in the home building space together. And we created this new Home Builder Action Council back in October of 2022. And you've got 2 members with us today that are part of that council and really are leaders in that council. That's why we invited them here to share their stories and the journey that they've been on and how they can positively influence others, not only in their own industries, but then across the country. So we're really excited to have them here with us. When you look at building codes across the country, things are changing, right? And all I'd ask is that you draw your attention to the green bars and the 3 comparisons here and how things have changed over time. So the electric wave is really catching on in water heating. You can see the percentages here. Many jurisdictions are adopting building codes, mandating things. We all know stories out on the West Coast, but it's moving across. And you're going to hear that from our panelists today. So there's no better time to jump on board with heat pump water heaters in the new home construction space than now, with all this momentum and all the changes in codes and policies upcoming. And then, here's a quick highlight. Here's our two panelists today. One is Clayton and one is Beezer, and each build slightly different types of residences, yet are both equally passionate around the heat pump water heater technology and bringing that to their customers in the home space and delighting the new homeowners accordingly. So you're going to hear that a little bit more today. And then lastly, I'm going to turn it over to Trudy and let her open up the panel session.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate that. Love co-hosting this with you. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists who are coming with us on this journey as we talk about new construction today. Effectively today, we are trying to make this a lot more of like a conversational space. So we're going to have some time for our amazing panelists to introduce themselves. I will give a little blurb before each person goes to introduce themselves. So I give a little context, and they're going to have some awesome information about who they are and their outstanding work. After we get our panelists introduced, we're trying to open the floor up to you all. So, with that being said, as a panelist introducing themselves, I highly encourage you to please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in your questions there. Just like puts a siloed place for us to look at everything and then be able to address them and point them out later. You're welcome to use the comment section for just general comments, but if you have any questions, please do put them inside the Q&A section so we can better support you and better collaborate with you. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dean. He's going to be kicking us off today. We have an amazing representative from Energy Star today. Is Dean Gamble is the technical manager at Energy Star for single family new homes. Dean is the technical manager for the EPA's Energy Star single family home new program, which he has helped support, define, and implement for over 20 years. With nearly 2.8 million homes certified, Energy Star is the nation's largest voluntary residential market transformation program, and they deliver cost-effective strategy, efficient homes while improving their durability, comfort, and equality. So who else to speak on it and add more except Dean? Thank you. Go ahead, Dean. You can share your slides.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Let me go ahead and try sharing that. Let's see. Okay, is that coming through?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, really happy to be joining everyone today. I'm always happy to be talking about heat pump water heaters, and just want to share a little bit of information about how they fit into the Energy Star residential new construction programs today. So those programs of ours cover three important sectors in the new construction arena: single family homes, new multifamily buildings, and then new manufactured homes. And what the Energy Star label does in this sector, which some people are familiar with, some people are not, is it allows an entire new home or an entire new dwelling unit or building to be labeled with the Energy Star if it's built from the ground up to be more energy efficient. So a lot of people see the Energy Star label on computers, on water heaters, on appliances, but this can actually be applied to homes and buildings as well. Now, our program has been around for over 25 years. It has been working with thousands of home builders across the country over that time. We've certified millions of homes to date. So I'd like to say that we are, a productive and popular and effective program in our own right. But the Inflation Reduction Act was a real, change for us. It tied the Efficient New Homes tax credit to the Energy Star residential new construction programs that we're talking about for the first time ever. And that tied to our programs in 2023, and it extends for the next 10 years through 2032. So because of that, we now have a bunch of new friends. So we are on track to certify close to 300,000 new homes and apartments this year alone, which is far and away the most we've ever certified before, and close to 3 million actually certified to date by the end of the year, around 2.9 million or so. So certainly a lot of people paying attention to how they can make their new homes and new buildings more efficient in this arena. Now, for the Energy Star residential new construction programs, these core programs, we don't actually mandate the use of heat pump water heaters today. But what we do is define an overall performance target that the home has to meet. And that accounts for the efficiency of everything, including water heaters. And as the codes have progressed, Paul was just referencing this, our performance targets have gotten more stringent as well to stay one step ahead of the curve. So we developed what we called version 3.0 in response to the 2009 IECC, and then a new version called 3.1, which is even more stringent, and then version 3.2 in response to the 2021 IECC. And as these performance targets have gotten more stringent, something like a heat pump water heater that can be 3 times or more efficient than a standard water heater becomes an increasingly attractive measure to add to the home to help meet these performance targets. So even though they're not mandated, again, they're becoming more and more known as a measure that can help you achieve certification for your whole house. And finally, for my introduction, let me just end with a shout out to Energy Star Next Gen. That's a new certification that's above and beyond these core programs we were just talking about. It was just launched in 2023, so it's essentially brand new. And it actually goes above and beyond these core programs to recognize 5 achievable, advanced, and market-ready innovations. Among those innovations, of course, is heat pump water heating. So to earn the Energy Star Next Gen label, you actually do have to put a heat pump water heater into your new house. And what Next Gen essentially is doing is painting a picture of what we think residential new construction is going to look like in the future in this country. And that picture, of course, includes heat pump water heaters. So we're really excited about Energy Star Next Gen as well as just the technology in general and the role it can play in making new homes more efficient. With that, let me stop sharing and I'll turn it back over to you.
I appreciate you, and really am curious about next year. I'd love to dive into that a little bit later. Thank you. If you, Brian, don't mind starting to share your screen, so that way, like when I wrap, I'm like, I got you. Thank you. So obviously, the first person I'm going to introduce is Brian Shanks, outstanding person. So he's the manager of governmental affairs for Beazer Homes, and he's Beazer Homes is an industry-leading energy-efficient national home builder, and has, for the past 14 years, advocated for progressive, as I said, sensible energy code advancement. Just as of right now, currently, Brian is serving on the ResNet Standards Management Board, ResNet Standard Development Committee 300, co-chair of the ResNet Embodied Carbon Standard 1500 Committee, and recently served as the vice chair of the Economics Modeling and Whole House Metrics Subcommittee for the 2024 IECC Residential Consensus Committee. So Brian is stacked and is an amazing resource and a blessing for us to have today. So thank you. Go ahead. Please go ahead, Dan. Brian.
Yeah, thank you. I'm having technical difficulties. My apologies. Can you see a screen share?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Wonderful introduction. I'm excited to be part of this panel. I've been at Beazer for 14 years and have seen quite a transformation in how we go to market. We made a commitment in 2022 to build all of our homes zero energy ready home, with the backbone of that being the Energy Star program, which we've been a partner since 1998, certifying our first home. So going to kind of go through our journey with heat pump water heaters. And again, my apologies because I'm having trouble. Did I advance the slide?
Not yet.
Okay, well, let me try a different way then. Thank you. How about now? Because I'm not seeing it on my screen.
We're still on the first slide currently.
Okay. Let me
You
stop
could try
my
closing
share.
out and coming back in, maybe. Like closing out the share.
I'm going to do that. All right. Please again confirm you are seeing the screen.
Yes, we're on the home on the first page. Yes.
Okay. Did it advance?
No.
Oh my goodness.
It's okay. If you read through it, like we can visualize if you just in case. Oh, it did. It just advanced. Hold on.
All right.
Progress.
Thank you.
So yeah.
So our journey, and I'm going to change a screen here as well. Hang on. See if I can do this so I can read and look at the camera at the same time. All right. So, with our commitment to build all homes zero energy ready, we determined the heat pump water heater would have to be part of that strategy. With that in mind, we had to figure out how could we achieve the lower HERS or ERI that was required by the program. So conservatively, we've seen heat pump water heaters contribute to about 4 HERS points. Depending on climate zone, we have actually seen in combination with other efficiency features as many as 7 HERS points. But I would not recommend that to the greater group. I would say first get to your energy rater and have them model for you. But we have seen in general about a 4 HERS point improvement. And we have been installing heat pump water heaters in all of our homes for years in Florida, so we felt quite comfortable with their operational constraints from perspective of do they work. Of course, we had to test them in cold climates, and that presented its own set of challenges, but we have found since 2022, we have successfully employed them across all markets that we build in. As we went on this journey, we had to consider design considerations. First was location. Ideally, we're building in mostly the Smile States, the lower third of the United States, where we can locate them fairly easily in the garage. That's our preferred location. Inside the home, as we move into more northern climates, just because of operational consideration. But in the garage area, one of the things that we found from a location perspective was some municipalities require a clear box, basically a 20 by 20 footprint for the garage itself. So that necessitated us making really little carve out alcoves, if you will, for the heat pump water heater. And I'll show you a picture of one of our plans and what it meant to us. But then we also have to consider venting. There is approximately a third to a half a ton of ancillary cooling that comes off of a heat pump water heater. So where do we exhaust that cool air? In some of our markets, we're exhausting it directly to the exterior. In other markets, like the garage area, it's really a benefit to that space where it basically is a tempered garage. So those were considerations we had to make. Temperature constraints, again, we build in some cold weather climates, so we had to figure out what do we do to make sure the unit is in the operating range that the manufacturer recommends. In those cases, we located them internal in a mechanical closet and then vented them in various ways. And I would always encourage everybody to check with the manufacturer to see what the best recommendation is. And we had to add a condensate line that we didn't have normally with ultimately our electric or gas tank type units. So that was another consideration we had to make. In cases where we had a long run, we might have to add a condensate pump or as required by a municipality. Some of the things that we saw as a potential issue was what is the weight of the unit? Heat pump water heaters are typically a little heavier than a typical full 50-gallon tank, 65 or 80-gallon tank. So we had to check with our flooring designers. We had to make sure that we were meeting any state and local codes. And then we had to make sure, again, that we were making or meeting our electrical requirement. All of these are things that with purposeful planning are easy to overcome. They do take some consideration. And then last, we really had to think about recovery. And that is, what is that first hour recovery? I'll speak to that a little bit in another slide. But most of the major manufacturers are not recommending a continuous loop or a recirc pump. They more often than not are recommending an on-demand recirculation method. So we had to take those things into consideration as well. So we did have some obstacles to overcome as we began this journey. And one of those was really cost. For us, the adoption was really, generally speaking, could be as much as $1,000 more per house if you consider a typical electric or gas tank type water heater. However, we in our strategy to go to zero energy ready had made a transition already to gas tankless. So if I look at the most efficient gas tankless unit and I compare it to a heat pump water heater, in many cases, I'm really a par cost. So I would encourage anybody, their purchasing teams to look at the cost. What's that cost delta? But that was one of our first objections. That's an internal objection that came from our purchasing staff. And then the next was product availability, and it's growing. It's growing vastly quickly with the manufacturers. But at the time, one of our primary manufacturers said that heat pump water heaters only represented about 4% of their annual production. So we had some concerns as a volume home builder. What ultimately did that mean to us? Again, we have overcome these objections by working closely with the manufacturing partners. The other was, where do you find the 700 cubic feet if we weren't already installing a tank water heater? One of the things that we've seen with the next generation units is that they require less volume, less air, so it helped us there. We did find some capacity and first hour recovery issues in the cooler climates. We have overcome that with thermostatic mixing valves. Those are other considerations that anybody looking into heat pump water heaters should be aware of. So, in general, I've kind of gone over all of these things. One of the things we had as an early adoption was a question about labor and transportation. Could you transport the units? Did they have to be upright, or could they be laid on their side? Again, you have to check with your manufacturer. Some of them do have restrictions on how they can be shipped. The other was the weight of them, hauling a heat pump water heater up a flight of stairs, down a flight of stairs. Again, all of those objections we've easily overcome with really that purposeful planning. So I'm going to show you this is a carve out nook that we have where we had to keep a 20 by 20 space in the garage. And so ultimately we captured some space inoffensively out of a bedroom. One could argue now we've chopped up that bedroom, but in reality, as we would go to a third iteration of this plan, we would plan to relocate that bedroom space a little bit easier. And then I would close with the benefits of heat pump water heater, at least that we've found. We build in California. Installing heat pump water heaters help us meet our Title 24 requirements. They also help us stay ahead of emerging code. The 2024 IECC incorporates heat pump water heater as part of it. They do meet the next gen Energy Star requirements that Dean mentioned. I would boast that we are either the very first next gen certifier or one of the very first next gen certifiers in our Maryland market. And they do help us also meet Zero Energy Ready version 2 requirements. So all in, that's an ancillary benefit for our above code programs. They do reduce our annual energy consumption. We've seen our million BTUs annual consumption reduced by both space conditioning heat pump and water heating heat pump, also reducing our CO2 emissions, improving our HERS scores, and we've seen utility programs offering a pretty wide range, but seen at the floor about $350 in incentive. And on the very high end, we've seen incentives in the $3,100 range. So a lot of ancillary benefit to heat pump water heater. And then I'll return this to you, Trude.
Nice. Thank you so much, Brian. I really needed that perspective for the product about how it's incorporated into these spaces. So thank you so much. I'm going to transition us to Elliot, our last but not least amazing panelist that we have today. Elliot, feel free to just kind of like start fiddling with trying to share your screen as I introduce you. What is it? So Elliot is an amazing person. It's Elliot McCrary. He is a QA engineer for Clayton Homes, where he manages the Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Homes program for 39 home building facilities. This role has allowed him to follow his passion for sustainable building practices and reduce the utility costs of homeowners. In his free time, just some for vibes. You can find Elliot either riding his mountain bike or repairing old bikes in his shop. Just a chill dude doing some chill work. Go ahead, Elliot.
Thanks. So happy to be here talking about heat pump water heaters and the journey Clayton's been on for the last 2 years, really focusing on the Zero Energy program and Energy Star. It was great hearing from Energy Star earlier talking about some of the jumps we've seen since the Inflation Reduction Act got in place. I can say for Clayton's sake, that was a huge factor in our commitment toward the Zero Energy and Energy Star program. Having the rebates established for the next 10 years gives us a long runway to really be able to plan out and take advantage of those programs that are available. And the heat pump water heater was really the key to achieving that Zero Energy Ready program. So for manufactured housing, the Zero Energy and Energy Star programs look a little bit different. So we don't have to do the HERS rating things that are done on the residential side, but we do have essentially a point buy system that you have to have so many energy efficient items in the home to achieve a certain amount of points to be able to meet the minimum requirement. So the heat pump water heaters was the key to getting enough points with our homes to be able to really dive in headfirst into that program. So we got all 39 Clayton home building facilities certified to build zero energy homes in May of 2023. And then beginning in July of 2023, we have gone to full zero energy homes production. So all of our standard product is zero energy ready. We market that under the term e-built to have some marketing branding around that. But since then, we have gone full bore with the heat pump water heater. So essentially, all but a very small percentage of our homes, I'm talking less than 2%, are now equipped with the heat pump water heater. We've had a great partnership with Ream to accomplish this, mostly using our 30 amp 240 volt hybrid heat pump water heaters. The benefit of the hybrid is that if, part of the issue with moving to a new technology, things like that, is people have misconceptions. They like to stick with what they know. So when it comes to the marketing side, having the hybrid technology there kind of helps us, encourage people to take a leap on something new. So, we can explain that they'll get greater efficiency with the heat pump side, see lower utility bills, and if they don't like it for whatever reason, they still have the electric resistance heating that they can switch it back to. So we've found that helps quite a bit. We've also had lots of good positive stories of significantly reduced utility bills after switching over to these heat pump water heaters. So it's been a wonderful change for us. So yeah, happy to be here and answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Elliot. Thank you. Thank you all for your amazing introductions. At this point, I am going to go through the questions that I see in the chat currently, actually, and just kind of, engage with the order they came in. And I'm probably going to start with, I saw somebody asked about whether or not we're just kind of broad strokes question. We'll be sending these slides. Yes, we will. I think Heather posted her email in there. So yes, we will have access to all their slide decks. Thank you for asking. A question, I believe, for Brian, to the new builders, and also if anybody at the panelists feel like they want to chime in on this, please do. To the new builders, are you finding that by using modern space heat pumps without resistor strip heat, that you have enough leftover panel amps for common high power 30 amp HPWHs and 30 to 50 amp EV charging? Or are you leaning more toward power efficient HPWHs to leave more amps for other electrification? How is that working for you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would tell you from our perspective, part of our strategy as we go to market includes EV charging, part of the Zero Energy Ready program requirement. And as such, we've looked very closely at our panel capacity and have been able to deliver, in some cases, some unique cases with the footprint size of the house, finished basements, et cetera, we've had to actually upgrade to a 400 amp service. But in almost all cases, we've been able to stay within a 200 amp service, which is standard for our homes across the country. So we haven't had to really consider, any special requirements or different types of heat pump water heaters. And hopefully that helps a little bit. But for us, in our experience, and we build a typical 3,200 square foot would be probably an average conditioned square foot home for us, generally 2-story on a slab. So obviously, if you're building bigger homes, then your panel capacity might be higher already, and that might lead to some different considerations.
Awesome, thank you. I hope, and of course, I'm intentionally not going to say who was asking the question. You're welcome to look through the chat if you're really curious. I just kind of keep anonymity for the vibes. If the person who wants to follow up on that, please feel free to do so in the chat, or just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. And I thank you, Brian, for that great answer. I got a question for Elliot. any tips on marketing? Well, again, this is open to everybody. Please do chime in if you would like. Any tips on marketing HPWHs to home buyers in traditional gas markets? I know that, for example, Dean, you might have some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can say that in this whole program for us has been about education, educating our retailers, so that they can then educate our homeowners and everything. So for the most part, it's just kind of explaining the technology. There's obviously been some significant improvements in the last decade. That these things have been on the market for years, but especially recently, they've become significantly more efficient. So just kind of explaining that, again, talking about the hybrid water heaters that we use, kind of explaining that, hey, even if you're a little skeptical about new technology, I get it, but we have this, you still have your traditional water heater essentially built into it. That helps quite a bit, but also just, showing them the math, look, you're going to use this much less electricity a year. It's going to be, this dollar amount back in your pocket every month. And that goes a long way as far as education.
Dean, any other panelists want to add anything? / Paul, you ready? You want to chime in?
As long as we're talking, Elliot, you're mentioning your license, and somebody later talks about location of the unit inside of your structures and how you've gone about doing that. Obviously, in a mobile home construction, space is such a premium. I'm not saying it's not a premium, Brian, in the homes that you build too, and you've talked about that. But certainly in a mobile home, when you talk about accessibility, you talk about proximity to other living spaces, with the output of cooler air, with the small hum of the heat pump when it's running, accessibility to clean air filters, things like that. Can you take us through the journey of how you guys have learned over time and how you've optimized and addressed all those things?
Sure. Yeah. One of the big changes we did when we did decide to go full in with the heat pump water heaters, it required a slightly larger amount of space, to put it into. It starts the closet compartment, things like that. So one of the things that we did was go across the board and standardize our mechanical room. So essentially we said, okay, we have to have this much amount of space. We've got to have this much, louver door to have air excess, return air, things like that. So we decided to have a designated room called the mechanical room, put the furnace in there, put the heat pump water heater in there. That way we can have a designated space. It's usually kind of off of the utility room or the back door. So kind of away from our, main living areas. So you're not hearing that extra hum from either the furnace or the water heater. And you're not also getting that, cold air exhausting into a bedroom or a living room, things like that. So we do just exhaust into the compartment. So we're not ducting it outside. So that is part of the consideration there that's slightly colder air, especially in the wintertime, things like that. So we tend to try and get them in kind of the laundry room area near that kind of back door, away from other living areas, things like that.
Thank you.
Just add,
Yeah.
can I just add something there, Trude?
Of course,
in response to Elliot's comment about the marketing side and what we've heard from some of our other builders using heat pump water heaters, most of the homeowners experience hot water not at the equipment itself, but obviously the faucets. So as long as they're getting hot water, they're happy, right? And so I think if you're doing the necessary work up front to kind of mitigate some of the differences with heat pump water heaters relative to other systems, as long as you're delivering the hot water to the consumer, they're happy. It's going to be more or less invisible to them in the background. So I think that's an important thing to consider, that, and in some sense is going to sell itself with some explanation in terms of why it looks different, why it's operating a little bit differently, and that you're getting better savings out of it. And Brian might have something to add there.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. I would add the same, is that our consumer experience is the hot water itself, and they generally don't care how they get that hot water. If you can, as Elliot described, you can make the case for how much more efficient they are than other methods of heating their water. They get a little bit more excited about it. I've heard some concerns, again, internal customers and external customers, about placing the unit inside a home. The actual operation, and especially if you're doing a next-gen qualified home, you have to meet certain decibel requirements. But ultimately, most modern heat pump water heaters operate in the 45 to 55 decibel range. a typical conversation is 60 decibels. So recognizing that the unit itself doesn't operate 24 hours a day, it's generally one of those things that out of sight, out of mind. There is some question about where you dump that air. It sounds like Elliot's come up with a way for them to effectively deal with that. Again, if we locate in a garage, then we're really giving a tempered garage to most of our customers. So that's a ancillary benefit for them. So we've been able to work around almost all really objections. And then certainly, as Elliot mentioned, education is key. When you help your customers understand what they're getting, it's a Porsche compared to a Yugo. Maybe some of you guys are too young to remember those, but anyway, the bottom line of it is that with education and proper placement, generally no objections to overcome.
That's great. And Brian, really for any of our panelists, do any other non-energy efficiency benefits of these products appeal to your customers today? When you talk about the loss of a fuel source, health, environment, spaces, is any of that resonating with your customers today, or is it really more a strong play on the efficiency?
I mean, I'll take that first, Elliot, and then maybe you have some comments to add. But sadly, to a degree, our consumers expect an efficient home product. And so I don't think that they recognize or even maybe care, I hate to say it that way, about the ancillary benefits, the carbon footprint reduction going from gas to electric. I think there's a growing expectation from our home buyers that we are delivering an efficient product and one that's been well thought of. I don't want to diminish that experience by any stretch of the imagination, but I think really I don't know of, Paul, any,
okay.
And we're not marketing it differently either.
I understand. I think it goes back to what Dean said too. People just want hot water when they want it, right?
Yeah.
And everything else behind the scenes don't
I mean, maybe just to kind of emphasize what Brian's saying and framing it in a slightly more positive light is living up to the expectations of the homeowners, right? I mean, we hear so many people, even friends and family, who move into a new house and they're like, I thought it was brand new, so it's going to be perfect. And they have a bad experience. And that's the most disappointing thing, because you've intentionally sought out like a different product that no one has lived in before because you think it's going to be so much better. And it probably is a lot better than your typical existing home. But if you're kind of missing on delivering on the expectations of the homeowner, then that's a really disappointing experience. And so I think what Brian sometimes is honestly too modest about with what Beazer is doing is kind of being so thoughtful about what they're putting into all of their homes to kind of help ensure that that experience is so good for homeowners. I think, all of our panelists, I always appreciate our builders, but particularly some of the ones we have with us today are just the kind of corporate level thoughtfulness with which they're going about transforming their homes is very admirable and impressive to me.
And Dean, clearly we have two heat pump water heater heroes with us, and I'll let Elliot. Right. Did you want to respond to that too?
Yeah, absolutely. We're kind of in a unique position being from manufactured housing. A lot of people have preconceived notions of what that is. Obviously, it's a very price point focused product. Energy efficiency has always been an afterthought and in our industry. So that's slowly changing. One of the things we did when we first started, fully diving into zero energy is do some marketing research and see, what those, how those kind of benefits sell and appear to the customer, things like that. And what they found was that for the first time almost ever in them doing those kind of researches, that sustainability and energy efficiency was actually one of the things that customers are looking for in their homes. So, whereas maybe historically that was kind of, not something that was really considered, more and more it is something that customers are aware of and are asking for more information about and everything. So that's been hugely beneficial for us to show. One, we can point blank show like, here's a typical house we built last year compared to our house this year, and you're saving, $300 to $400 a year on your utility costs. That's a significant savings, but and also just reducing our carbon impact and things like that as well. It all helps quite a bit. So from the manufacturing side of the world, being able to start incorporating that into our advertising has been great.
Fantastic. And Dina, what I was going to say, we've got two of our biggest heroes here leading the charge in the home builder space, but you get to interact with a lot of home builders who are still on the fence, right? Thinking about this. So what are the things that you hear from them that they either consider an opportunity and or a challenge that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
Well, we hear from a lot of builders who maybe are using electric resistance water heaters today. And for them, like, it's not a fuel switch, it's more of just a step up to a heat pump water heater technology. So that's kind of like a good stepping stone, especially for builders that maybe have different markets with different fuel types. Like, that's an easy access point, particularly as Brian was saying, in markets where a lot of construction is happening, where you can put it in the garage. And it's not just a drop in, you have to plan for it still a little bit, but it gives you a lot of space and volume to work with. What we've been sort of encouraging builders who are maybe just starting to contemplate heat pump water heaters is plan now for where you want to put it. Start to make those decisions in advance, because you might only be, as a builder, redesigning your plans maybe over 3 to 5 years significantly. And so when you're going through that redesign process, figure out in the future where you're going to drop it in. So you might not be purchasing, say that you're not going to purchase, heat pump water heaters for your homes for another 7 years. That's fine, but have that space already dedicated in your house to drop in the heat pump water heater when you're ready to make that jump, because the prices will keep coming down. The efficiency is going to keep driving you towards considering it to help you hit these performance targets, and you just want to be ready to go when you decide to flip the switch on it. And you can repurpose that space to something else until you decide to take it up with the pump water heater itself. So that's the most important thing, is start to think through the architectural side. In addition to the space, it's, along with the venting the venting strategy. Is it going to be just, sitting in a space that's big enough to accommodate the needs of the manufacturer, or are you going to have it close enough to like an exterior wall that you can actually vent it out or pull in air to extract heat from? So I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. Great advice.
Thank you, Dean. I'll go back a little bit when we were, I think Elliot and Brian were talking about heat pump water heaters. Got a great question here about do you guys recommend or do you not recommend circulating pumps on these tanks? Because I think the question was more so, how can we simultaneously both blow air and like suck it out at the same time? And that was kind of a question that was in the chat. And if so, why can we not add 30 amp boosters to these heat pump water heater tanks as well?
So I can say, at least from our perspective, venting the heat pump water heaters to the outside, and I think I may have saw a comment mentioning it as well. There's a risk of it creating a negative pressure scenario. So especially when we look at our houses in the southeast, those hot, humid areas, that's not something we wanted to basically get into. So we just opted for exhausting it into the home. Again, that kind of goes back to trying to get our mechanical rooms away from the living areas, things like that, because it does exhaust conditioned air. So in the winter times, it is not a good thing necessarily, but especially in the southeast and everything where it's hot and humid most of the year, we didn't want to create the potential negative pressure issue of sucking in moist air into the home.
Awesome, thank you. I think there was there was a conversation back and forth in the chat. So thank you for a little bit clarifying. Paul, do you have any? I keep going, but
yeah, common theme in the chat has been around mixing valves, integrated mixing valves, and recirc pumps, and whether you're using those, recommending those, or if it's installation driven.
We don't use those. We just install the heat pump water heater unit. But that's something we've kind of looked into on our residential side with a higher end product, things like that. But most of my experience on the MH side, we don't use those.
Yeah, and we are migrating pretty much across the board to thermostatic mixing valves. Have applied a little bit of pressure to the manufacturers to ask them to make that an included part of their product delivery. And again, agree that they give us some benefit in increasing capacity. So if we have some constraints in our attached product, we can stay with a 50-gallon unit and still service the needs based on the requirements, been working with the Energy Star team on program requirements, et cetera. So a lot of conversation is being had around the thermostatic mixing valves.
Yeah, I'll just second that. It sounds like it's emerging as a successful strategy to do what Brian is describing, just basically add on the capacity that you have with a smaller tank to provide all the hot water that the homeowner needs. So it's something that we've taken to heart based on these early adopters and are thinking about how to integrate that into the program requirements going forward. It seems like a real good, from what we've heard so far, it sounds like a real good investment with pretty acceptable trade-offs compared to one that doesn't have a thermostatic mixing valve. So
makes sense. I saw a comment earlier in the chat about the 120 volt version. So if you could tell us why or why not 120 volt versions of heat pump water heaters are a good choice for new home construction. Anybody want to take that?
I mean, I would say, Paul, from our perspective, we haven't even considered them. I would think they probably are a better fit for an existing retro market, where, generally speaking, if we went from a electric resistance, we already had a 240 volt circuit. And so I just really don't imagine that we would ever look at them. And I would think really the energy consumption that would be associated with the 120 volt circuit versus the 240 would be really a negative, in my opinion.
Okay, actually, with that, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Judy.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was actually just gonna kind of go to a question in the chat that kind of is kind of circulating this. Any thoughts from the panelists? Dean, you can take this too. Please do. Have you heard of the watt diet and effectively reducing the amount of capacity on an electrical panel that will ultimately reduce our national demand on our electrical grid? Do the 120 volt options allow that? They contribute to that? Is that an option? Is it viable?
I mean, so first off, I would just generally second what I heard Brian say, that, for the most part, builders are dealing with 220 volt, 240 volt to begin with. They have the capacity for the panels to put it in. It's not really the compressor that's requiring the 240 volts, it's the electric resistance portion of it. So, given that builders are relatively new to the technology in most cases, they really want to ensure that the homeowner has the most hot water that they need at any time. I think they're continuing to stick with the 240 volt by and large to make sure that they deliver the best consumer experience that they can. It seems like the technology around 120 volt continues to evolve and advance, but it just is probably not a consideration for most builders today. I would say in terms of the electrical code and the electrical panel requirements, there are some efforts afoot to kind of reconsider how much capacity you have to set aside for these electric appliances, because there's some emerging research saying that, just because you have 240 volts sitting there, it doesn't mean that you're going to be using that at any particular time, especially if you look at the diversity of various electrical appliances in your house. And so what would be great is if, Brian has mentioned this, in some cases, the electrical code is going to push them to 400 amp panels because they've exceeded the sizing capacity required by code, when in fact they may never actually bump up against that capacity that they're required to set aside. So if we can have some evolution in the electrical code to keep everyone lower at 200 amps, that not only helps cut the cost for the builder, it also cuts the cost for the electrical service that has to be provided to the house. So you end up spending less money, less electricity set aside to send to the house in the first place that might never get used. So I do think there are some very promising efforts afoot that hopefully will pay off in the midterm there.
There was another question talking about a combination of heat pump water heater with a solar systems, a solar water heater combo. Any of you are considering that, or Dean, maybe you've seen that out in the marketplace or considerations for it as well?
We're just now starting to get into the solar world. There's some further considerations to make with the AMH side. Main thing being our trust is, where are we going to put the panels, things like that. So we're just now starting to kind of dabble our feet into the research of it and to kind of get a hold of that. So may know more about that this time next year, but right now we're just now starting to kind of look into the solar thing. One thing I will mention just on the panel box sizes, where Dean's talking about going up to like a 4040, or a 200 amp service panel box is kind of the sweet spot for us, but we do have lots of 100 amp and even some 50 amp that are out there, some of those old parts and stuff. So that is definitely a consideration for us, is, you know, the electrical load. What other appliances do we have in the house that are taking up spots in that panel box? So absolutely, a 120, that would be something, you know, we would look for in those markets in the future. But yeah, we're definitely adding that heat pump water heater on there with the 30 amp breaker and everything. It adds a bit to the panel box, so it's you know, one less spot you got.
And Paul, I think I've heard something about the kind of PV integrated products.
Yeah.
It seems a little niche right now. Generally, for again, for builders that are dealing with new construction, I think their calculations around PV are very market dependent and sort of independent of specific end uses. So it either makes sense to put panels on the roof because of favorable pricing, resale prices for the power, or it doesn't make sense and they don't do it. So I don't necessarily see that as being inherently tied to like the use of heat pump water heaters. In general, with next gen, we're trying to electrify most of the end uses in the home and use these advanced technologies to do that. So, you know, that is a good precursor to adding PV to your house, I think, because you can offset more of the energy directly. But it's really a separate calculation than the efficiency side from our experience.
Fair enough. Brian, you mentioned earlier how you're hearing from some of your trade partners the challenge of transporting heat pump water heaters. They've got smaller vans that traditionally haven't needed the headspace that required to stand these units up vertically, so they're laying them down, but then they're frustrated when they get to the job site because now they've got to stand them back up and let the refrigerant settle out. So maybe you could talk about how has that played out? What are some of the solutions that you've worked with your partners in order to make sure that they don't have to go out and buy a whole new fleet of transport vehicles, but at the same time they do have to be conscious of the lay down versus the stand up?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't hear everything within our organization, but I would tell you of the trades that I've talked to directly, through some education and experience, we have found that, again, no objection that is not, that we're not able to navigate. I would tell you that the early adoption created some of those questions, and then it's just more about education. I wish I had a silver bullet answer for you that, you know, would cover everything. But what we found with the early naysayers was that once they started doing it, that they were able to certainly easily work around it. A little bit of maybe additional planning. And what I find over the time, you know, the efficiencies that we've put in our homes is that we've educated a workforce, maybe sometimes painfully, but ultimately we've made them better trades, and they've found that ultimately, if they do a better job of planning, they can be more effective and more efficient in their daily operations as well. So I have not found any objection that we weren't able to navigate by really purely just education and conversation with the manufacturers. Again, I don't know that all manufacturers allow you to lay their heat pump unit on the side. That's something that you would have to actually talk to the manufacturer specifically about. But the headroom was the question specifically, Paul, that they could no longer stand them up in the vans.
Yeah.
And so how were they going to get them out to the job site? We offered a couple of direct ship options where the distributor was shipping them to our job site, and they've worked it out. They've been able to figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
I got a cue for Elliot specifically from the chat. Does Clayton Homes have a HPWA sizing method or table for certain home sizes, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, etc., and U.S. locations, cold versus hot climates? I believe you spoke on this a little bit earlier, and I think Dean and Brian also talked on this and the factors that involve this. But do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll say we just offer a 40-gallon standard. That's pretty much what you'll get. And then if you want to do an upgrade, we do offer a 50. With the heat pump water heaters, they have faster recovery times, and the size of our houses, generally, we don't see that folks will really need the 50-gallon. But again, some people like to have that extra. If they've got a lot of kids taking a lot of hot showers, things like that, they want to have that extra capacity and everything. So we do offer that. But no, we don't size those per the house. We just have the two options there.
Thank you.
Yeah, for Energy Star Next Gen, we have minimum requirements for sizing. That's based on the number of bedrooms in the home. So, I mean, nominally it's like 40, 50, 60, and 80, depending on the number of bedrooms. This is where like the conversation with Brian has been helpful and other early adopters, where if you add the thermostatic mixing valve, you can kind of boost your capacity without necessarily boosting your tank size. So there's some interest in sort of accounting for that within the program requirements, particularly when you get tipped up into like 80 gallons where the cost and the size goes up, in a noticeable way. Being able to offset that and downsize again and sort of making up for it with a thermostatic mixing valve might be a better strategy overall. It's something that we're definitely exploring with our partners right now.
Me too. I was giving some breathing room here in case Brian, you want to chime in. But no, Paul, I do have a couple questions coming in. If you have something to respond, that's great. I'm just gonna keep rolling. If you have
No,
any thoughts.
please. Yeah, we've got just a few more minutes, but let's try and address as many as we can.
Sure. So I'm gonna ask a question that's kind of cross-cutting for all of you. So you have such amazing themes and expertise. I could try to like go through it all and it's not going to cover it. What is your vision for where the market will be in 5 to 10 years with heat pump, water heaters, and new constructions? And what needs to happen now to ensure that, in your opinion? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I can take that, Trude, if that's okay. So our vision is likely going to migrate towards split systems. We see some benefit from a perspective of space constraints, really operational noise consideration. There are some on the marketplace that are fairly trendy in cost right now that we would have to see some, price consideration changes there. But when we think about the GWP of one for this one particular manufacturer on a refrigerant side, it really speaks strongly to our mission, our guidance, and our vision to the future, and really how impactful we will be on the environment. So that's probably where we see it still includes heat pump technology because we believe it truly is the future of the homes that we're building. Hopefully, I took that in the right presentation. Yeah.
Thank you. I would respond, but I almost want to hear everybody's thoughts first before I like chime in and ask anything else.
Elliot, do you want to go next?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess my vision for the future would be continuing to, go down this path of more efficient housing and better running housing. So, specifically for heat pump water heater, I would love us to step in and try a split system as well. Going away from the hybrid and do have a full, heat pump water heater system. I think that would be really, really neat to try. We're very new into that world, so I'm excited to see where we could take it in the next 10 years.
Cool. And I would say, just like as an Energy Star sort of philosophy, we're kind of incrementalists and pragmatists. And so I would say I'm really excited just about the adoption of this technology that we have today. I mean, almost all water heaters out there today going into new homes, 1 million a year, are operating an efficiency at best of around 1. We have these products out available now that are 3 times, sometimes 4 times more efficient, just sitting there waiting to be used, particularly for electric resistance to heat pump water heaters. It's almost a no-brainer. So what I'm hoping to see in the next 5 years is the price continuing to come down, products getting a little bit quieter, so that's just becoming a complete non-issue. I think we're almost there. And just seeing more and more familiarity from the trades and the builders and the suppliers to just start putting these in a lot more homes, I think is going to happen. I think all the sort of pressure is there to start considering that, and the innovations are there to start considering that. And I think once we hit that tipping point, it's really going to make a huge difference, to suddenly have something that's 3 or 4 times more efficient than what we have in almost every home today. So I'm pretty excited about just that next step. And then beyond that, who knows? We'll get to kind of Brian's ambitions of split systems for everyone.
And Dean, I would echo that too. We work very closely with all the manufacturers, and they say the same thing. Let's target our efforts on those opportunities that represent the fastest conversion, all those electric resistance, whether it's new home construction or it's existing installs now, to get us to some critical mass, some tipping point, like you said, and then we can build on that momentum for some of these more potentially challenging applications as they come. So I think that's very well said.
Yeah. I know that we are hitting time right this moment, and we do have to close out like in a couple like a minute or two. But I do know that we have some really amazing questions that we still didn't get answered, and so please feel free to forward those to Heather. Her emails in the chat, or feel free to contact any of us directly. I believe we have our contact information is also available. I'm at New Buildings with Joe Akunis, who introduced us. And again, all of the these amazing panelists and their slides and their information and hopefully ways to contact them will be available if you have any more thoughts, and we'd love to collaborate and or grow our market transformation. Just to close this out here, thank you so much to our panelists for these remarkable in-depth discussions on the current state and future of heat pump water heaters and new constructions. We focus on technical challenges, we focus on market incentives, broader electrification goals, we talk about design considerations, and truly as product market transformers and program managed transformers as well. This has been a very valuable moment for us to convene and validate and question. So thank you so much for your expertise. It means everything. And I hope you all have a beautiful afternoon and keep enjoying Heat Pump Water Heater Day.
Thank you, everyone, very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Huge thanks to Dean, Brian, Trude, Paul, and Elliot. Fantastic presentation. Really, really interesting perspectives on where heat pump water heaters are going, new constructions, and thank you to our leaders. Don't miss our award ceremony in just a little bit. Both of their organizations were nominated for an award in the new construction category, so you want to check that out. We'll appreciate you all a ton. Well, we want to go back and also thanks Clayton Homes for sponsoring this session. And I think we have figured out a couple of our video challenges. So I'll turn it over to the PKV team to play the sponsor message, and we can say thank you again to our presenters and moderators. Thank you guys so much.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Is this really too much to ask for? A family. A future. A simple life where hard work turns into a little comfort and a bit of prosperity. A home where it all unfolds. We don't think that's asking too much. So we're changing the way homes are built, helping you save up to 50% on annual energy bills, so you can put what matters more within reach. E-Built by Clayton. New, attainable homes, a fraction of the cost of living.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. And folks, we are doing fantastic on time. We are going to take a quick break and come back to you in about 10 minutes with our central heat pump water heater manufacturer roundtable. Really excited about that. So stay tuned, stay with us. We'll be back in just a little bit, and we're going to put a resource up during the break that shows a little bit about Clayton Homes and an article that we wrote about their monumental decision to go to heat pump water heaters. So check that out as well. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Stay tuned and keep transforming the market. Thanks.